Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're calling from. We've got a great seminar or workshop going on today. It was such a popular one from a registration standpoint that we couldn't have just one Mark B, so we actually brought you Mark B squared. So you're going to have both Marks here presenting today. As we're waiting for people to get in, people are just rolling in here. Please drop in chat where you're calling from, and Joel, if you can call those people out, and we'll just get we'll get a couple quick polls started, and then we'll pass this off to Mark B squared. So we'll just launch the first poll now.
I think it's always cool to see how many different places people attend these from. I mean, all over, North America, and sometimes we get people, down in Australia even. So, yeah, let us know where you're calling in from.
Ontario, Canada.
Nice.
Richie, Virginia, Exton, PA. Keep them coming, guys.
All right, so it looks like 2/3 of the attendees attended last week's seminar on the Neo Top 10. This is great. All right, let's move to our next one. Nice simple one. Are you currently installing PowerG?
Wow, they're coming in fast now. Anderson, South Carolina, Parksburg, West Virginia, Riverside, California, Marietta, Georgia. Huge variety.
Look at that. So 80%, roughly 80% are currently installing PowerG. That's awesome. And 5% plan to start after this workshop.
Nice.
Great. All right, we'll move.
Our first European here. We got Indy from Belgium.
Oh, sweet.
We have a city, New York, that I don't know that I can pronounce. Apaqua? I have no idea.
Okay, Joel, not everybody can pronounce Okeechobee properly either.
This is great. So yeah, 83% are considering PowerG for resi, and just over 70% for commercial, and 25% for industrial. That's something we definitely need to work on. But that's great. Really good. All right. And two more quick ones. Here we go. What applications do you use the IQ panel in? Residential, commercial, industrial, MDUs, and builder market. %, 95% residential, 63% commercial. That's great to see. 15% in builder. Yeah, these are some really good numbers there. Great to see. All right, one last poll. This should be an easy one, and then we're going to hand this off. So here we go. What would what new PowerG devices would you like to see in our product roadmap? So feel free to select all that apply.
PowerG sleep module.
A sleep module, that'd be cool.
Yeah. Way I can get more than 6 hours each night.
So, yep, as expected, high demand for a PowerG touchscreen. PowerG heat and smoke CO combos definitely up there in high 70s. That's great.
That smoke CO combo, that would be on my list.
Some people, about 55% would like to see the IQ water valve have PowerG in it. 60% for smart plugs and light switches. This is great. All right, I'm going to close these polls. Thanks everybody for your attendance, and I'm going to pass this off to Mark and Mark.
Thanks a lot, Neil. It's a pleasure to be doing this webinar with Mark Buckley. I'm Mark Bateman. So yeah, big time pleasure here. And like I said, this is our PowerG best practices. So we hope today that we can go through this webinar and we can, enlighten you on maybe some things you didn't know about PowerG and how it works, and things that might make your job easier and just, make you be a better technician. So with this, first off, what is PowerG? For that 20% of people that answered on the poll said, hey, I'm maybe not using PowerG, what is it? When I was first introduced to PowerG, my mind was blown away. And the main reason why was the range. You're getting 4 times the range with PowerG compared to your legacy sensors. So your 319, your Honeywell's 2 gigs, even the Qualys legacy, you're going to get 4 times the range compared to those legacy protocols. And it's also a two-way communication. So with this sensor, unlike a legacy sensor, it actually talks to the panel and it can receive, a communication back. So, what do you get with that? One of the cool things is maybe like with your smokes, when one goes off, they all go off. You also have remote access into them. The battery life. These PowerG sensors have a lot longer battery life, 5 to 8 years, depending on the sensor and the use case for them. And then they're also, what I would call ultra encrypted, 128-bit banking level encryption. So really cool sensor here with PowerG that you guys are using or that you might start to use.
So we're going to talk about some basics as well when it comes to PowerG. So this is a best practices seminar. So start at the beginning, start learning in the devices, and then we're going to have a handful of slides, and we've got Joel and Neil in the background that can answer questions as we progress through these slides. So what do we want to do when we get a sensor into a panel? We want to learn the ID in, preferably by auto-enrolling, and we're going to talk about that. We need to associate that sensor. So if we're auto-enrolling, we're already passing the encryption key. So you're going to hear us talk about that encryption and that association in a lot of these slides coming up. And our third step is always going to be placement test. You want to know it's going to work where it's installed. And so we have multiple ways of you being able to test that logic, whether you're doing it at an IQ2, whether you're doing it at a Neo or a Pro panel.
So the first step of this, like as Mark mentioned, is the pairing process. And to pair a sensor, one of these PowerG sensors, you're going to put the panel in auto learn just like you normally would. But one of the differences between PowerG and maybe the legacy is how they actually enroll. And there's a few ways that they can enroll, but the main way is that enrollment button. So you'll notice on this sensor here, this is the 9945, it's a door window with an auxiliary terminal, but you'll notice that H, there's actually a little button there, and it's actually next to the tamper. So on this button, to learn it in, you would hold that down for exactly 3 seconds. Once it's been 3 seconds, a LED, an amber LED will light up. You release it right away, and it will learn in. If you hold it down for 2 seconds, it's not going to work. And if you hold it down too long, let's say 5 seconds, it's also not going to work. So to make it enroll, you hold it down for exactly 3 seconds. Once you let it go, your panel will make a noise, will chime and let you know, hey, it picked it up. And now you can go look at the sensor and the panel and make sure that BL code matches. Or, it's going to first show you a 3-digit prefix, and that's going to kind of show you what sensor it is, a door window, a smoke, or whatnot. And then once you see that's right, you can go through and configure that sensor, the group, the name, and then save it. So that's how you enroll it. But on each sensor, the main thing I want you to know here is that each sensor is going to have a different spot for that enrollment button, if it's a motion or whatnot. And there's also different ways to learn these in. Some devices, it is this enrollment button. Others, though, will come with pull tabs. So by powering it up and you pull that tab, it'll enroll in. A smoke, that could be, hey, I insert the batteries and it turns on. For some of them, it's going to be holding down a button for like a panic. So we'll kind of go over those a little more in detail when we get to the devices. But the main thing we want you to know here when pairing is that there's an enrollment button that you hold down for 3 seconds.
And a good tech tip here, Mark, as well, is if you do get that wrong. So if you only held it for 1 or 2 seconds, or if you kept your finger on the button for 5 or 6, just let go, press and release that tamper, and then proceed to use that enrollment button again. So when we do the association, we've got a variety of panels we mentioned before. So IQ2 Plus, a Neo, a Pro panel. So as you can see here on the screen grab that we have for you, an IQ2 Plus panel will pop up an associated number, and will give you that programming in order to add the label into the sensor. It'll give you the ability to change the chime for that sensor, but it'll also give you that encryption link once you've enrolled. Now, of course, the association can be checked later, and you see those grabs about these are strong and the signal is strong. That's all from the sensor testing, which we're going to talk about here as well. But at the bottom, you'll notice a couple little rules that we like to talk about. If you don't have an association, if it shows a not network condition on a panel, we'll show you that on the next slide. In this case, on the Qualsys IQ2 Plus, we can tamper and restore and then activate the device. That will create that association. We can hit the enrollment button again to send that data. We can power cycle as well. So those are all tips and tricks that you want to utilize when thinking about associating on the IQ2 Plus. A lot of guys just move on to the next sensor, the next sensor, the next sensor, and then everything they've done previously will be working for them. Now, if we move over to Neo and Pro, and we want to go into that auto enrollment process, you'll see a few screen grabs here. If I enter 804 as a programming location, you will get that image that's small and down in the corner. Once I hit 000, that subsection, you will get the image that you see now on the right of your screen. With the green check mark, I'm ready to do something. I could manually key in that 7-digit serial number that Mark spoke about earlier. What I'd like to do here is auto enroll. So if I go to auto enroll, I will populate that 7-digit number during that process. I can add a battery and auto enroll, and now I can be stepped through similar fields. So what zone do I want to put this in? What definition do I want to have? What partition is this sensor going to be in before I exit out and enroll my next device? And that association can also be by tampering and opening and closing. So if you did send this through DLS5 programming or alarm.com, if you did manually key in the 7-digit number, you can do that tamper, restore, and activate. Down below, option number 4 there, walk test. A lot of technicians will realize that if I already have sensors enrolled and I power cycle a panel and I get a not enrollment or not network, sorry, I can just put the panel in the walk test, reestablish all those connections, and then exit out of that walk test mode. So just a few tips and tricks here. Mark?
So something really cool on step 3 now is the placement test from the sensor side. So he showed you earlier how you could actually see the sensor strength at the panel on the IQ panel. But from the sensors themselves, with these PowerG sensors, there's actually LED lights that light up to let you know your sensor strength, signal strength. And to put it in that placement display mode, you just have to tamper the device. So a lot of times you've already been learning them in, and it's going to be in that placement display mode, or placement test mode is what I call it. So, and that's active for 15 minutes. The way this works, you'll see that sensor on the screen light up when you tamper, or when you actually trigger, open and close the door, activate that sensor. You'll notice, you'll see a red light flash, followed by 3 quick flashes. They're either going to be green for strong, yellow for moderate, or red for weak. Some good things to know here, like if you're learning all these in at the panel, as you're walking back to place them, if you'll tamper them, if you'll trip them every 20, 25 yards, it's going to make sure it's reestablishing that connection. It's kind of a tech, tip to know, and just make sure your signal strength is strong. These have something called auto adjust, where actually if a sensor is closer to something, it doesn't have to use as much battery strength, or if it's farther away, then it knows you have to use 100% each time. But as you're tripping it, as you're walking away from the panel, it's going to make sure that connection is consistent. And even when you get to that point where maybe you're walking back and now your sensor's showing yellow, that could be, 1 or 2 things. Sometimes I'll retamper it just to make it do that auto signal adjust, but it could also be letting you know, hey, this is a good place now. It's going yellow. This would be a good place to maybe step in a little bit and put in a repeater if I'm doing maybe an enormous warehouse or something. So just some good things to know there. And when I've done, and we've been out doing, range testing with these, and we're out in, let's say, the salt flats. When I get out there, and these will go in with the IQ panel, it's about 3,500 feet. What are you getting, Buckley, out of the Neo?
I've seen 5,000, 6,000 feet open air when you're doing the salt flats. It's a little bit different when you're on a job site going through a lot of obstructions, but it's how we can test. Yeah.
We're out there a lot of times, hey, if it's not connecting anymore, I'll go tamper it. And a lot of times it'll do the auto signal adjust and then start. You realize, hey, I'm far away. And
Right.
I normally say, hey, when you're on the site, you take that range that we normally quote, let's say it's 3,000 to 3,500 feet, and divide it by 4. So that's even with a legacy sensor. If you're normally testing 600 feet, you might get 150 or 100. With these, it's going to be, 3,000, you might get 600 to 1,000 feet. So just depending on the situation and the construction of the building.
Yeah, so true. And obviously, if you have a large application, you just took one sensor and you wanted to walk test the whole building just to see how the range is working, you might exceed that 15-minute time period. Just retamper, as Mark said before, and then proceed. So these were some grabs as well, Mark, that we had on the placement earlier. So did you want to talk about that strong good pour, how it corresponds to the same color coding? I love it.
We go into the PowerG test, and this is on the IQ panel, just under the test menu. Go into PowerG test, and right here, it just pulls up a screen, and you'll actually see each sensor, and you'll see the last time they tripped, what the strength is, strong, moderate, or weak, and it's color coded also. So really cool here, and then you can actually go in and you could get more detailed with those sensors. And one thing that's neat, if you're using the PowerG PIR camera, you can even take a test image, or you can even do a test LED where you can make that LED light up, check that association. I don't know if there's anything else you'd want to add there, Mark.
Well, I think just on a Neo or a Pro panel, we have a placement test for all wireless. So you go into section 904 and you can test any siren, any device, any zone, and you will get the same feedback. So just the way it displays a little differently, it will just have the word strong, good, or poor right on your screen. So the testing is consistent as you think about all of the different panels where PowerG is supported.
Hey guys, interrupt really quick. I placed in the chat there, courtesy of Dan Johnson, a link to a walk test tech tip that he posted some time back. So everyone can click
Excellent.
on that link and download that.
Thanks, Joel.
Now I'm just going over really quickly, briefly on part of the PowerG device lineup, and we'll actually go into more detail on some of these, but these are the majority, or this is a lot of the devices we have. And the first one would be that LED keypad. You got a door window with the aux input. I love the outdoor, has a very, can be used for extreme temperatures. So some great things here. But I also want to talk about some of these, how you would enroll them. So, if it's going to be the smoke, you could do a pull tab or maybe the battery insertion, depending on the device you get. Let's see, anything else you want to add here, Mark?
I think, other than me grabbing the pen and drawing a little bit like a little kid, I see this lineup and I realized that years ago, wireless motion detectors, you had 1 or 2. I see, 10 on the list now? So depending on the application, we can be pretty specific as to the exact product you need. So if it's an outdoor application, if it's an indoor, if you need mirror optic or a ceiling mount motion, as you can see, there's a wide variety of PowerG, which is pretty exciting here. And so I think as we progress forward, we want to talk individually about some of these components and the best practices that we want to implement. So, Mark?
I'll let you talk on the LED
Okay.
keypad.
Oh, good point. So the fact that, the legacy DSC has a few part numbers, HS2 designations. One would be a LCD keypad with a WF or wire-free, and the other one would have Pro at the end. Those 2 wire-free keypads, because they begin with HS2, are not to be used for Qualsys. So even though there are 3 different keypads, we wanted to highlight this WS9 because it's specifically for the IQ2+. So keep that in the back of your mind. Another major point that you see on the slide here, the use of the 9-volt adapter. You can run these off of batteries. So there's 4 AA batteries. but the screen will constantly go blank and you'll have to wake the keypad up. So using the 9-volt adapter will keep this alive and much better experience really for your customers. When we go to learn this in, what's really nice is on the screen, it will say press star and 1 to enroll. So that auto enrollment procedure on all the control panels, and on this one, star and 1 together. So.
Hey, Mark, I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second on that
Sure.
one. So for the 9-volt adapter, just for those folks in Canada, it ends with CAN, and there are versions across the world that will end slightly different. So 9V adapter, and then there's a few different versions, but Canada would be CAN.
Thank you, Neil. Yeah, as you can tell, we're putting these together sometimes for the U.S. market, and we forget about our Canadian and worldwide brethren. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. And just to go with that, also on that keypad, I'm going to say I do strongly, we all strongly recommend it. You always use that adapter, plug it in. When you run those off battery, you do see lag in them. So I'm a huge fan of make sure you power those up properly. The next sensor we want to kind of touch on is this PG9945, our door window. This is an awesome sensor. It supports, hardwire heat via that aux input. You can do normally closed, normally opened. You got the end of line option. And then you have additional supports. You can do panic buttons wired into that. Resi water flow. I see this all the time. I've been out on job sites and people will have, the water flow in their house and they can just hook it up to that. Can hardwire in a contact on a metal door, or you get those commercial or those garage overhead doors. This is perfect to just wire it into that aux input.
So interestingly enough, this next sensor looks exactly like a 9945. We call it a 9309. You can see it's commercial door windows. So what does that mean? Well, your average door in a residence or a small business might open 2 to 200 times. What about those sites that are like Home Depot front doors, 1,000 to 2,000 activations daily? So on the 9945, in an ideal world, we'll get 8 years of battery life for those 20 to 200 openings. Here with this one, you'll get about 5 years of battery life for those extra activations. The enrollment then has changed from the 9945 needing to press the button to a pull tab. We do have a second input. So you've got a ground, you've got an input 1, input 2. Right now that input 2 only works on the Pro panel and in that device prefix. So here's the first time we get to talk about this, is when we started building sensors, we had panels that already existed. So if you learn this sensor into an old Neo, when you auto enrolled, you would see 101 as the designator followed by a 4-digit number. And the 4-digit number should match the sensor. The fallback mode is 101. If you learn this on newer control panels, you will see the quote real 110 designation followed by the same 4 digits. And so be very careful about those fallback prefixes on our newer products. So new products, old panel will still work, but you'll have a fallback designator. And so we can provide that. Joel, I'm not sure if that's something that you can maybe add a link to in the section there for everybody, if you still have that fallback list that was created some time back.
Let me see if I can dig it up really quick.
Thank you.
Now moving on to our recessed, the PG9307. Some best practices here is that to enroll this sensor, since it's not your typical PowerG sensor being recessed, it's kind of built differently. To enroll it, you just insert that battery or tamper to learn. It says tamper, but or tamper to learn. Has removable tabs. That was my bad. It was Mark's bad. One of us two. Has removable tabs. Has that 3/4 inch drill hole size. And if the tab's removed, and that door, you see that all the time on some of these recess where it's just too tight, you need to remove those tabs. Then sometimes you want to countersink it. So you do a 7/8 inch hole, or is that 0.08 of an inch, first hole millimeters.
How much? First pull of that drill, right, Mark? So
those are the best practices with the recess sensor, though.
So outdoor, that's one of the new products that we have today. So very low temperature range, so you can see the extremes both for minus 40 degrees, Neil. That's both in Celsius and Fahrenheit, as we did the calculations once before. I know you've dealt with that this year in Canada. And so a lot of temperature extremes, you would want to use this. There is an aux input. So if you did want to wire a pull-apart gate contact, you would ignore the magnet. But it does have anti-masking for all panels, but it's going to report as an anti-masking event on a Pro panel or as a motion event on the other panels. So excellent sensor here for all kinds of applications. And I'm kind of excited, even though we're talking about best practices today and kind of flying through these slides, I'm thinking that we should probably have an application session, maybe 30 minutes, where we discuss real life. Where do we put these sensors and why do we use them for a certain job? And so I think we'll maybe move forward and do that. But Mark, how about this one?
All right, and that last sensor I just want to mention, speaking of that, is, man, the magnet gap on that sensor is amazing. I have a couple of these on the gates on the side of my house, and you know, the wind can blow or whatever, and since it has such a larger magnet gap, I don't have to worry about it accidentally tripping. So really neat sensor there. The motion detector, this is a PetImmune, the 9914 detector. You can mount it flat, mount it in the corner. Some good things to know. It can be tricky, even if you're pulling these out of the box. How do I open this thing up? Well, the mount, it's right here, it says mount wall bracket first, and then click upwards. So if you're gonna pull it off, you'd be pulling down. That's a good thing to know, because I've seen techs, even myself, when I first played with this, trying to open it up, and I had a little bit of trouble. Also, if somebody does not have a pet in their house, we strongly recommend that you remove the pet mask. It's actually a piece of plastic that's a pretty thick piece of plastic in there. It's kind of blocking off the bottom half of this sensor. So yeah, if they don't have a pet, make sure you remove that piece of plastic out of there, that pet mask. And then the last thing is the high traffic shutdown. By default, on the IQ panel, this is going to be 2 minutes, meaning, hey, it sees motion, shuts down for 2 minutes, and then, you know, it will wake back up, kind of. You know, with legacy sensors, a lot of them are 4 to 5 minutes. With this one, you can actually, when you're learning it in on the IQ panel, you can say if you want it to be as low as 2 minutes, or even if you wanted it to go up to, is it 30 minutes, Neil? I mean, Mark?
You can go to 1 hour. Yeah, you go 60 minutes. Yeah.
So, and that was on battery life, depending on your situation, you know, if it's a convenience like that. And then also, as it says here, detector disabled when disarmed on the Neo or Pro. So by default, that's going to just be disabled. So when it's disarmed, meaning not going to work in the when it's disarmed. So if you needed it to work, if you have like home automation set up, you know, with alarm.com, then you would want to enable that. So, you know, you walk past it and it turns on a light or something like that.
Makes you set a timer at that point. Very good point. So rather than only having it come on when you arm to away. So I know we're coming close to the end of our time frame, and we want to be cognizant of that fact for everybody who might need to leave and abandon us. We do have a lot more to present. We have a lot of slides, a lot of best practices. We'll try to hit on some bullet points here, and then maybe go over by a few minutes for those that wish to stay. And I'm sure everybody can read as well, so we won't necessarily go through every single detail. But we have a handful of ceiling mount motion detectors, in this case a long range. So keep in mind there is a mounting height, and it's a min and a maximum. Once you get to that largest mounting height, you will get the longest or widest coverage area, as you can see on those specifications there as well. And Mark, I'm just going to keep going here on this motion detector. So an outdoor detector, also we have to worry about mounting height. So there's a limit, which also impacts the coverage area. So every single installation manual that we give you with these sensors, so that's that white piece of paper, you know, it usually looks something like this, and it's folded up, and it's not a protector for the sensor. It's actually an installation manual. So there's good data in here. You will see a chart about how your coverage changes based on the mounting height. So pay attention to that. Obviously, with outdoor sensors, we want a higher battery changeover. and usually a sensor that's not reporting an alarm, but it's reporting as a local or a non-alarm, especially when using alarm.com to get data back to your homeowner. So on the last motion here, you can see the specifications change a little bit more, not only for the detection range, we're calling that sensitivity, that low, medium, and high, and that really just has to do with how far those beams shoot out. But one of the key things is this is a definable pattern direction. So if I had this shooting across a garage overhead door, I could say, well, from left to right, when I leave that door, it doesn't activate, but when I come in, so if someone were trying to come in because you accidentally left that door open, or that's the protection you were looking for, you could set that up as a directional device. So Mark?
Moving on to our shock sensor, the main thing I want to touch on here is that when you program this, if you want it to be both shock and then like an open close with the reed switch or the auxiliary input, you want to make sure you program this as door window M. The reason why that stands for multifunction or dual function. So it's going to default as shock only for the IQ2 Plus, but just realize that this is a multifunction sensor, so that's why it's going to be a door window -M, which the M actually stands for multifunction. This is our glass break here. Once again, range of 20 feet here, 360-degree coverage. You know, do not install on the same plane as glass. This is something I've seen many times where somebody will have it on the same wall as the window. I've even seen marketing slides where I'm like, that's not correct. To be able to actually pick up that sound, it's going to have to be on a side wall or up on the ceiling to pick up that sound. So that would probably be the best practices for that device.
Absolutely. So key fobs, they are unique in a lot of facets with bidirectional wireless, but this is the main takeaway as a best practice. When you're auto enrolling, if you press and hold that star button to enroll into any of the panels, you will see an LED flash. And it's going to be in that 1 to 2 second realm that Mark was mentioning earlier. And you might, oops, I see the LED, let me let go, and then it won't burn in. What has to happen is you press and hold that button, you'll see a flash, and then as that 3 to 4 seconds appears, you'll see an LED come on and latch on, and that's when you can let go. So it'll just take you a couple to get used to enrolling. Once you do, it's second nature for everybody. But you know, another key thing about fobs, especially when using panics, is make sure that you test them in various locations around the facility, because otherwise maybe that panic button won't work. And the panic does take longer to activate. So you see that little note there as well. And even with a single button press, the same thing. When you press and hold that button, that LED, and of course, especially panics, you really do want to test those locations. A little note here for the Neo and Pro folks is, you know, unlike the IQ2 Plus, where this just enrolls as a sensor, takes up one of the 128 zones, on a Neo or a Pro, it does take up a zone and one of the 32 fob slots. So if I had an application where I needed more than 32 panics and an IQ2 panel will work, there's answer one. Answer two is maybe in a Neo and a Pro, if I have fixed panic locations, I can use a hardwired panic button wired into a PG9945 and set that up for panic or define it as panic. So Mark?
Great info there. So moving on to our smoke heat, the main things I want to touch on here is, once again, to enroll this, you're just going to insert the batteries. Some cool features is that one go, they all go. They're wirelessly interconnected. And with that IQ panel, you can even make it so they'll sound during any alarm event. So if somebody was to break in the house, it's going to just sound, be an additional sounder for you. As far as when you want to trip this, you're going to be holding that test button down for 3 full cycles. That's 5 seconds. And then moving on to our CO, the carbon monoxide, it's going to be the same thing. Hold test button down for 3 full cycles. It's 6 seconds on this. And once again, it's inserting the batteries to enroll it.
So temperature sensors, we've heard a lot about these lately. Alarm.com has a small business temperature monitoring. if I could just get that acronym out correctly. So if you enroll a temperature sensor into a panel, we have different groups and types, high and low, but we also have programmable thresholds that are pretty wide. But I think the main takeaway here is if you're going into that 0-degree freezer or refrigeration at even 25 to 30 degrees, use that temperature probe. Use the optional probe that wires in and allow the sensor to be in the regular temperature. So besides temp sensors, we have water. We have a lot that actually we're not covering because of time. And so being 5 or 6 minutes after right now, we'll talk about some sirens. Mark, if you want to roll here, and then wrap it up for the day. And hopefully, Joel, you've got some questions you've been answering in the background. I keep seeing the question button light up. So I'm hoping you're handling a lot of this.
Stop looking at the question thing and focus.
Help myself.
Best practice or thing I want you guys to know about this device, the siren, is that it can chime. It can chime for entry and exit beeps. That's configured on the panel. You can change the volume, low, medium, or high. It's defaulted on the Neo to be medium, but that's a pretty cool, feature with this. It's a siren, but you're in a huge warehouse or something. You might want to know when that front door, the offices is, somebody comes in. So really, really neat siren here. Some features with it. With the repeater, once again, just like that siren I saw, it has an enrollment button. Must be powered as it's always listening. And the panel will support up to 8 of these. These will not cascade, meaning you can't repeat a repeater, but you can kind of spider web them out from the main panel or transmitter.
And a key point here to notice is the view. That's why we had this one after the indoor siren. They look exactly the same. And so be careful when you're trying to identify components out in the field. If you open the cover, you'll know exactly what it is by its serial number or its configuration. Are you battery only, or are you power like you need here with the battery? So hopefully that gives you the overview of a lot of the components that we have. We only maybe touched on half. So we have a large PowerPoint slide that has more best practices and more of these tips and tricks that we can give technicians. So we've been more than happy to share that with anybody who reaches out to your technical account manager. So Joel, anything? I know we went over a good 7-8 minutes, and any questions that we need to answer live for the audience?
We've got it all.
We've got it all covered.
Wow, you guys are good.
You guys are awesome. So hey, we appreciate you, everyone that was able to attend today. I found these to be very valuable, even for myself, these different workshops. Once again, this is a weekly thing we're doing where each week we're going over new topics. So we look forward to having you guys on next week at the same mark time.
Same mark time, same mark channel.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Joel. Thanks, everybody, for being on. Have a great afternoon and rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone.